today. Danielle and I met just a few weeks ago. Got referred over to Danielle, somebody that is just absolutely crushing it in business right now in multiple fronts. So Danielle is the owner of Danielle Throckmorton LLC, Reach Retreat, and T5 Plumbing. So we're gonna dive into each of those a little bit today. So Danielle, thanks for joining me. And I'd love to give you the opportunity just to introduce yourself, and then we'll dive into some questions.
All right. Well, yes, me and Drew hit it off. So I'm so glad that Crystal introduced us. I love whenever we get a warm introduction, and we had a really good conversation. So I'm excited to be here and hopefully share some really good information for you guys, get you thinking. But a little bit about me, he shared that I wear many hats, literally and figuratively. Um, and I became an entrepreneur 10 years ago this year. And there's a lot. We could go into so much depth, but actively, I host retreats. I also am a plumber and co-owner of our plumbing company. And yeah, I speak and I lead entrepreneurs through strategic support, through one-to-one support, as well as masterminds to allow them to design businesses that serve their life and really build on a strong foundation. So that's the broad scheme of what I do.
Yeah, I love it. I think one of the things that I appreciated about our first conversation was just kind of your journey into entrepreneurship. And so I'd love to kind of start there. And what got you started? Like, how did you decide, yeah, I'm an entrepreneur, like I'm not a 9 to 5 person? What was kind of that initial step, or how did you get into it?
Okay, so if you have never met me before, you know I don't do a whole lot of surface level conversations. So we're just going to go deep now. Honest answer. I mean, I searched for a while of like, how do I address this without being so heavy when people would ask me this question? Because of course, like my dad was an entrepreneur. So there was, he was a single parent. So I did really see that modeled in my childhood. But it was never actually on my radar. It was nothing that I saw possible for myself. I was a teen mom, for those who don't know. I got pregnant my junior year of high school and struggled to work a full-time job while I had a toddler as a single parent. And I was actually offered a job the day my divorce was final. So I was divorced really young, married really young, and I ended up working there for 7 years. Well, about 2 years before I left the law firm, I suffered a pretty tragic loss in my life. I think a lot of us can relate to those pivotal moments that kind of shape us. I got a phone call that my 17-year-old baby sister, Morgan, had been in a car accident. And in a matter of 30 minutes from home to hospital, everything shifted in my mind. Um, I remember the day that I had the conversation with my daughter. She was about 5 years old at the time, that she had lost her auntie. And it really put into perspective for me how precious time was. I think sometimes it takes something like that hits us close to home before we realize like it's not infinite. It's those moments you can't get back. And
Right.
I was still working at the law firm at the time, really blessed to have that job and have built a lot of what I use today there. But I was choosing between taking care of a kiddo when she was sick or choosing a vacation. I was, only seeing her 2 hours a night in the evenings, and I was soon to be getting married, and I would gain two more children. And I just thought to myself, like, I don't want someone else raising my kids. I want to be their biggest fan in the stands, and I want to make a bigger impact. I knew I didn't want to be a lawyer, so it was time to kind of like dig deep into the roots of what I might want to explore.
Sure.
Um, so a few months later, my husband and I got married. I was still kind of in that deep level of grief. And on the way back from our honeymoon, I told my husband, I was like, I don't want to go back to my job. And he said, well, don't. Well, we couldn't afford that. I wish I could say that I quit my job, but I didn't. And I thought, okay, well, I just planned a wedding. So why not be a wedding planner? And he
I
was
love
like,
it.
okay. So within a month from when we landed back from our honeymoon until I launched the website, I created and got certified as a wedding planner and launched my business. But it took me 2 years working full time while doing that and getting out of debt before I could go full time. And now it's evolved since then. I'm no longer a wedding planner. If we want to go into that, great. How my role has evolved, we can go into that. But there's no real short story besides losing my sister is what motivated me to be the master of my time. And that's where
Yeah.
entrepreneurship fit that model.
I love that. I think I think you're right. I think there's there's always those pivotal moments in life that something happens, positive, negative. Um, and it's awesome that I think that was the thing that I appreciated the most is like you took that opportunity and used it for the betterment of your life, right? To actually go after. And I think it's very easy to go the other way, right? And I think that was I love that. I'm glad you shared that because that was something that I was like, this is so awesome. And it also the more I talk to different business owners, is everybody's journey is a little bit different. You know, like sometimes it's, hey, it took me a couple of years to get to where I was like, yeah, I could quit my 9 to 5, and everybody's story is different. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
Tell, let's dive in a little bit more. So the plumbing business that you guys started, I love. What was I guess, the journey into getting into plumbing after being somebody that's done wedding planning and like helping businesses and throwing events? How did that come about?
Okay, so my husband, Preston, and I, when I lost my sister, we were in the dating phase. We dated for about 2 years before we got married, and his job actually would not allow him to come home. So for the first 2 to 3 days, when I was in the thick of grief, he was subjective of like, if you leave your job, you will be fired. He ended up quitting his job, and he came home to be with me and with my family. And at that moment, we had this like heart to heart discussion of like, is this the time to make a pivot? He was in the oil field. He was a field electrician since he graduated high school for about a 7 year career. And he was missing nights and weekends. He was missing ball games. He was missing time with his aging parents. There were just a lot of things in our lives that were just not syncing up. And so he said, what if I look for a local job? Let's just kind of see what things look like. So he went from making 6 figures to about $14 an hour working at our local university in maintenance department. And that's where they do a little bit of everything. He fell in love with the plumbing side and decided to go on a journey of the last 7 years of becoming a plumber. And he wanted that time with our family. He wanted that time with us. And so it was really weird because it took us a while to realize that's actually both of what we were seeking.
Right.
And it was not easy on our family to go from that to $14 an hour, but we made it work. And he had this desire to own his own plumbing company through what he had seen that I had built over the years. And he was like, I think I could be a business owner. I don't think I have to work for someone else. So we went ahead and went full time about 2 years ago with his business. He was side hustling since I think 2021, and went full time 2 years ago, one man in a truck. And during that time, I was consulting a trades company actually that was a client of mine. It was a women-owned HVAC company here in Oklahoma, and I saw exponential growth in their business working together. And I said to my husband, why am like, if people are paying me to build their company, why am I not building ours? And he's like, well, I've been kind of waiting for you to want to. And I said, well, I've been waiting for you to ask because I don't want to be like the strategist consultant wife. Like, I want to be married happily. And he knew that I
Right.
was very passionate with what I've built over the last decade. And so finally we were like, let's lock arms. And so we did back in April, almost a year ago. And Drew, it has been insane growth.
That's
So
amazing.
it's been like, we're definitely way better together than separate.
That's awesome. I think it's funny too, like even being in the same household sometimes with people is like you can talk about what you're doing with other people, but there's always that blurred line of like, okay, how do we separate the communication of like, okay, this is business and then this is personal because those
Yeah.
lines get blurred. And so the fact that you guys were able to really figure that out, I think is awesome because sometimes that doesn't happen, right?
Yeah. And there was more to it, right? Like, one thing for me that I think is important for us entrepreneurs to think about that I've really been challenging the women that attend my retreats, the clients I work with, and even me and Preston is like building for sustainability. And I
Yes.
think when life altering things happen, like what we went through with Morgan, realizing like that could happen to us tomorrow, it has actually been something that's like motivated me to be intentional with building something that's sustainable. And that's what really got me behind the trades business is the sustainability of it. um,
Mhm.
Even without me, like, my other businesses, retreats, speaking, consulting, like if something
Yeah.
happens to me, my income ceased to exist. And I didn't want
Yeah.
that.
I I want to touch on that point because I think that that's a massive thing for every business owner, right? Like the dream is like, okay, I create a business and I eventually hire people and I replace myself, and I've had this conversation with multiple people, and I've found that there's really a couple avenues that people tend to go. One is they do it way too soon, right?
Hmm.
Or two, they're the bottleneck in everything and they don't know how to hire that next person, right?
Correct.
And so they're doing it the right way and they're saying, hey, I need to understand everything. But like, what's been your approach in building that business foundationally, sustainably for like the long term?
Great question. So this could probably get a little broad, but there's multiple things. One, I think it's really important that you start with somewhat of an end in mind, even if it's not what works out. You have a target for where you're, where you're aiming, anyways. Um, and that's really important. I think a lot of times for me, I know as an entrepreneur, I think a lot of us can relate to being super like visionary. That's what makes us really great at our job. But then we go from 0 to 100 and we're like, crap, I actually didn't want to end up here. Anyone relate to that? Or is it just me? I've
Nope, nope.
done
I'm right there. I'm right there with you. So
through
yeah,
that's
that's definitely not
funny
just
with the
you.
wedding business because that's exactly what it was. And it stinks because you're good at it. So then there's like this resistance, right, of stepping away from what you're good at. I'm laughing right now because I'm like, Danielle, you're so talking to your past self. But yeah, so I when me and Preston had the conversation of what does it look like, one, it was like we have to get your butt out of the truck. Like you cannot be trying to answer all of the phones. We need help in that capacity. You can't be trying to support the crew and the techs and answer their questions and mentor them while also here head on phone on the shoulder working on a water heater. And so like how do we set up a strategic plan to get there, because it can't happen overnight, otherwise we do
Right.
it too soon. And so one thing I've learned over 10 years was if you don't have strong systems and operations in your business, what are you even doing? That even just like the turnover of time of hiring someone new and them not knowing how to be properly trained. That would be my first one. I think you agree.
You're speaking my language. Like
Yeah.
we're very in alignment on a lot of things. I think our approach or terminology may be a little different, but
Mhm.
yeah, very I'm right with you. So keep going because this
Yeah.
is gold. For anybody that's building a business right now, this is gold right here.
Don't dismiss it because you hear everyone saying systems and operations and then you don't have time for it. Like you don't have time to not have time for it. Um, that's the key when you want to build for sustainability. And then I think it's really having a strong mission that your team can get behind. Something that's bigger than you. Like, yes, we build a business because it benefits Danielle and Preston, but like, what is the mission? And it's that showing the team like how it pours into their families and how that overpours, how the business overpours into the nonprofits that we support, how it pours into the women owned and just small business owners that we reinvest back into, from website design to operations support to photography to who we're purchasing vehicles from to wrapping. I mean, that mission of like the impact being bigger than you, people don't just buy into like a company, they buy into your values. Um,
I want
yeah.
to stop you there
Okay.
because I think you touched on something that I think a lot of people really miss. And it's something that I've touched on before in like talks and stuff I've given, but your ability as a business owner to be able to articulate your vision to your team is so imperative. And the
Mhm.
reason is like for what Danielle just said is like I if it's very easy to have vision as like a business owner and knowing like where you're going because it's your business. You're thinking about it 24/7. Being able to articulate that or put it down somewhere where people can actually see it, I think is so imperative. And I don't want to just gloss over that
Yeah.
because you guys are doing that. And I think that's a massive reason why things have been so amazing for you guys is you're not just building a business with good foundations. Like you're also building a team of people, but you're sharing your vision and like why it matters. Because a lot of times, especially I would say from like a plumbing standpoint, right? It's like you're not really like what's the vision of plumbing? Like fixing people's houses or leaks or whatever, right? But there's way more to it. And so I think you guys have done an amazing job of that piece, which most people don't, right? They don't know how to articulate that vision or where you're going very well. And I think that stagnates a lot of teams because they just show up for their job and then they go home, right? And so
Right.
it's like it creates more meaning around what they're doing on that day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and I think it's, one thing we love is we really specialize with residential. Yeah, you can make a ton of money in commercial, but we are a personal business. Like we want to come in and build long-term relationships with people. We want to get to hear their stories and we need to relieve their stress. They actually care. Like it's so great to hear from a customer how we were able to come in a stressful situation and restore water and basic needs, right? That are
Right.
inconveniencing them, and then hearing that our guys are the reason, or our ladies, right, both men and women are plumbers, but to be able to have them say like, Nate made me feel special, or Jeremy made me feel special, and taken care of, and getting those messages goes really far for us.
Yeah.
But yeah, at first when you think of being a plumber, you don't think like what sets these plumbers apart. It's just any plumbing company is a plumbing company, and that's really true. It's not true, and it's our job to educate why we're different.
Yeah, very much so. I want to You've taken such a different approach than I think a lot of service-based businesses. Um, what is the one thing that you think is super important? Like plumbing can be a very transactional business, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, like you said, I got a leaky faucet, or I got, I need a new water heater, whatever that is, right? A lot of times it's like, it's the urgency of something, right?
Right.
In that service-based area. What are some of the things that you guys have done and really made important, like creating longer term relationships, like to setting yourself apart?
Okay, so well, we could go really deep into like even why we branded the way we did. Like our tagline for our business and like what we really want to stand for is to deliver service beyond expectation. And that's because a lot of times they expect it just to be transactional. They expect not to have a relationship or maybe even a good experience with someone in the plumbing space that's coming into their home. Plus, nobody wakes up in the morning and is like, I want to call a plumber. Like, this is the best day ever, right? So when they're calling, they're usually in a crisis of some sort, or they're just really upset because they're spending money that was meant to be used somewhere else. So we know we're not your favorite people, but when you're in a bad situation, we want them to know, why do you choose us? One, education. Believe it or not, they want to know options. They want to know why things need to be operating differently. So we actually don't, we take the time to explain to the customer in English, like basic, a simple way for them to understand why we're doing what we're doing, giving them options, because sometimes it can feel really defeating to only have one way of solving a problem. We don't believe in that. So we really support our team in being creative and thinking of ways to help meet a need in any capacity. We also, we don't share this a ton because it's not the point behind it, but we have the T5 Give Back project. Our team's really passionate about it, but we also get the opportunity when we walk into Mrs. Jones' house, and you can simply tell like she cannot afford to replace a water heater. She's in not great health. She doesn't have a lot of support team, doesn't have the credit to get finance. Like we get the opportunity just to step in and make those repairs for her. And that's special to us. So I think that's something that we've led with. And then things like making sure the guys wear booties when they walk in the house, making sure that they call and communicate if they're running behind. Communication. And these maybe seem like simple things, but there's a lot of times that they never hear back from someone. If Even if a job didn't go well and something was wrong, I always want to make sure like we give them a phone call, we talk through the situations with them, we make sure they're taken care of. And I think from my reviews that I read from our customers, it's clear that we lead with education, that we are like, we're on time, we're punctual, um, and we leave a space better than whenever we walked into it. And that's, again, I don't know how much different that is, but I feel like from our customer feedback, it's clear that's what we do that's different.
Yeah, I think I don't think there's anything so crazy outside of the box that you guys are doing,
Yeah.
but I do think the difference between probably what you're doing and say other companies out there is you're being intentional about it. And
Right.
like one of the things that I'm big on is like referral programs in the right
Mhm.
industries and like how to utilize. And most of the time it's very in business, it's like, okay, what are we doing in marketing and how are we closing sales, right? But the onboarding, the client retention,
Oh, yeah.
the referral process, like a lot of times those are programs that aren't focused on because it's like, okay, how do we get business through the door and how do we close it and how do we make money? And then
Right.
a lot of the ancillary things kind of fall off to the side. And I think the big difference from what I'm hearing is you guys are being very intentional about those things, right? And I think that that's really the separator is it's not just a suggestion of, hey, put booties on, lead with education. It's like, no, this is how we do this. And this is the
Correct.
process that we're going to follow. And that I think is the main difference. And it's probably all your experience that you've previously had, you've been able to really just replicate here. But that to me is the intentionality of what you're doing is the separator, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny you say that because the tagline for Reach Retreat is a life of intention. So we intentional is clear. We have our 5 non-negotiables with our guys, and we make sure that our techs embody that. We make sure that we're consistent with that information and really setting the expectation that goes back to our tagline of what we want customers to feel when we leave their home, but also
Right.
how they feel when we enter their home.
For sure. What are some of the, like, I'd love to get in for homeowners. Like a lot of
Yeah.
times we're having these conversations for other business owners, but we're diving into obviously the more of the service based side. But like, what are some of the red flags you would say that homeowners should be looking out for when they're dealing with different service providers?
Yeah, so I think one of the most underrated things, and I put it in every time we're recommended in a post, which is literally the highlight of my day. Every time I see someone tag our business, it's everything. But I respond back letting them know, like, we are a licensed, insured, and bonded company. And I think that it's important to ask those questions, like what does, a licensed contractor is different than a licensed plumber. Those are things that I think are really not super clear, and there's ways to look up whether or not a contractor is properly licensed, if they're properly insured. That's really important, and it really differentiates between Joe down the street with a one-man truck, which is where we started. We all have to start somewhere, but
Right.
we even started licensed, insured, and bonded, right? So that's important. But you have to start somewhere. But I think that a lot of times when they call a service-based business, whether it's HVAC, plumbing, electrical, anything like that, they're just looking for the cheapest sometimes. And it can really be a really scary experience. We can't tell you how many times we've gone back. I mean, we recently just had a job where someone installed the water heater backwards. I mean, there's the things that we see is really important. So that's one thing that I would say, to be able to ask those questions. Um, and I don't think it hurts too to ask, what's the process as far as from start to finish? Like, what can I expect? We try to communicate that with our CSR who answers our phones, to
Mhm.
really explain to them clearly what the process looks like. I think a lot of times it's not as forthcoming. Like people will say, can you do same day service? And we explain to them, like, our goal is to do same day service, but there are times when we can't. And I think a lot of times people are oversold and underdelivered just because of their inability or maybe desire to research a business. Look at the reviews, you guys. If someone recommends you, send a message and be like, did you actually work with this person before? What was your experience? It seems
Right.
silly, but it's your home and you need to take care of it.
Yeah, and I think any of the major things, plumbing, electrical, HVAC, those, I mean, some of those things get messed up and it's not good. So like
No,
doing due diligence, I think people sometimes just want to trust, right? And a lot of times it's not saying that there aren't other people that can do a good job, right? But it's
right.
like making sure that you are allowing the right type of person into your home. And when you said like licensed, insured, bonded, like those are big things that most people don't think about, that are super important.
And water can destroy a home quicker than anything.
Yeah.
Um, and if you have hired someone who's not protected in that capacity, that's on you. I mean, there's so many times too, they say, I had someone install this, they gave me a warranty, and now I can't find their business anywhere and they're shut down. And I'm like, it's hard. It's a scary world out there. So I think just don't be afraid to ask the questions. That's it.
For
Like,
sure.
and they should have answers for you.
Right. Yeah, if they don't have answers, that's the red flag, right?
You're right.
Um, where do you see the business going? Like we talked about vision and things, and obviously, I'm a big proponent of when you start a business is you should. Now this can change over time, but the mistake I made in one of the previous businesses I had is I thought, oh, I'm just going to do this for the next 20 years. And
Yeah.
like, I wasn't building that to either sell it or to have somebody run it. Now, those things can change over time for sure. But I think you're building those businesses in different ways, right?
Right.
With the end goal in sight. But I'd love your, like, we talked about vision. Where do you see the, not only the plumbing business going, but I know you have retreats and things like that. Like, what is
Yeah.
that vision for you in the next 4 or 5 years?
Okay. Wow. Well, I do agree that we need to build with the intent to sell. Even if you don't decide to sell your company, or if it could be a legacy company where your kids inherited the business, and it continues with family owned. There's a lot of things in place. But again, or if you're incapacitated, the company needs to be able to have someone step in and take care of it while you're away, right? So again, it
Right.
goes back to systems, operations, good marketing, good reputation, good team members. There's a whole lot of factors there. um, Now, one of Preston and I's goals, like our big vision, right, is to um, be able to mentor and educate in whatever the way the Lord has directed. So right now we're getting to build up young plumbers. We have a 16-year-old that when he first started, he was like, I have no desire to be a plumber. And I was like, I don't expect you to know that. And here we are a year later, and he's like, I want to run my own truck. I want to be a plumber, right? And so
That's so
we
awesome.
just know like the Lord has laid it on our heart to mentor. And whether like right now I'm mentoring women that build businesses and the ripple effects they have, the security that these young plumbers are going to be building up. So we're just we're walking in faith. We're taking the necessary actions every day, and the way I've seen in every business that we have built up into this point is an unfolding. Like how the HVAC from consulting client led me to being like, why am I not working in our business? To It's just wild to me to see how it has unfolded. So I wish I could
Yeah.
tell you like the goal is in the next few years to have X, Y, and Z. Right now, we had a goal to have 5 trucks for T5 plumbing, and since May we already have 3, and so
It's
it's happening
amazing.
quickly. It's happening with intention still. Like I've really been like measurably tracking when it's time to hire the next um, you know apprentice or the next journeyman in our business. We're also looking at like what does it look like to have a GM or someone like that in our company. So we have like tangible goals, but as far as like
Sure.
5 years from now, T5 I hope is to this size. It's not there. The vision's not, even with Reach Retreat. It's not there because I really believe in walking in faith and allowing myself and Preston to be guided. And that's exactly where we have ended up, is nowhere we should be as two small town teen parents, like it's so much bigger than us, Drew, honestly. And that's the only way I can
I,
answer it.
I love that response. And I always, I always was somebody that had a very hard time setting specific goals, right?
Yeah.
And I don't mean like, hey, in the next 30 days I want to do something like
Yeah.
that. Like, I understand that. But when somebody was like, well, what do you want to do in 10 years? I'm like, I don't know, because it's like I've always struggled with that. And so I love the fact that you guys, and I always say this, but I say you should have a North Star, but you got to
Mhm.
leave room for miracles, right? Like, you should have your kind of like end vision in sight, but you got to leave room for like the things that you didn't expect, because maybe you're going to get there in 6 months because you met this person that wasn't in your life yet, or like something happened, right? So I'm very similar to like your state of thinking, where it's just like, hey, I'm going to move forward. I know where I'm going. I'm not like a
Yeah.
rudderless ship, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. So yeah, I don't want to like keep going on that, but I just love your response to that.
I am open to possibility, and I have goals where I have specific goals that I want to hit, but I'm also not married to them. And I think that has
Right.
allowed for blessings to have space, because otherwise, like when I almost like the whole rejection is protection, like knowing when it's time to close a door and knowing
Yep.
when it's not. So that's where I'm at.
Very much so. Well, as we're wrapping up here, I'd love to give you the opportunity. Obviously, we're trying to talk to as many business owners through this as we possibly can. But for the person that's out there that's maybe in their first year of business, or thinking about business, or going into something on their own, what are maybe a few things that you would want to let them know as they're starting that journey, or just in the beginning of that journey?
Okay, so I shared a little bit at the beginning is I feel like you really need to not know exactly where you're headed, like we just talked about a second ago, but really how you want to feel. I knew that for one of my big visions, right, was to have time freedom. But in the wedding industry that I was in, I was committing to dates and weekends 2 years in advance, not knowing that kids would have recitals. I was, working 14-hour days on a Saturday doing a wedding and then sick on Sundays recovering. And so I wish I would have when I first started my entrepreneurship journey. It took me almost 10 years to realize that, was that I needed to really think about how I wanted to feel.
Mhm.
I knew I didn't want to be location specific. So why am I building a business that's rooted in Oklahoma wedding venues? This week our kid had regionals in wrestling, and we got to be her biggest fan in the stands. Still work from a coffee shop in the morning before she wrestled, and I just told Preston, I'm like, that is what we built, is the ability to be present. And still do what we love. And so I think for that, that's my biggest piece of advice. Second is find a community, not just any community, but like your community. You don't have to build it, but you need to find the place where you can be authentically honest with about the struggles in your business, about the wins, and people actually be happy for you and challenge you. And so that's why I started creating retreats 7 years ago and being really intentional with what I accept and what I desire for that space, is because I needed that so badly. And I could not find what I needed in that season. And then it came to
Yeah.
be that everyone around me needed that too. So find a community, because I mean, you could probably do it alone, but it'll take you much, much more time.
I
So that would
dig
be my
it.
second. I'm trying to think third. Oh, third, know your money, know your numbers. Get with a good CPA, bookkeeper. You shouldn't be doing all that. That was the first thing I outsourced, and I'm so proud of that. But then also, like, know what your duties are as a CFO. Um, so many clients come to me that have been running businesses for decades, and they do not know how to master their money. And so I get to build financial roadmaps with them and tools to help them. Like, you can't make really driven decisions, intentional driven decisions, without that power and knowledge. And it's not that complicated. So find someone that can help you, because it'll be the thing that holds you back, because the fear of the unknown keeps you stuck.
Yeah,
So I think that's really important.
big time. I love it. I feel like you and I could probably sit on a call like all day and just
Okay.
pop back and forth. So I really appreciate, Danielle, you taking the time, sharing, and giving some of that insight. And I'm very excited just to watch what you guys are building, ongoing and working together in the future here. So
I'm excited. And Drew, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
you bet.